It was supposed to be my last quiet shift on the farm, just me, the animals, and the night. But when every clock froze at 2:17 a.m., I knew something was terribly wrong. The cameras showed what my eyes couldn't, and the whispers came from places no one stood. By the time the sun rose, I wasn't sure I'd made it out alone. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. It happened in late October, on a dairy farm off County Line Road, 15 minutes past the last streetlight of town. My name is Mike, I was 30, and this was my last night shift before I quit. The owner, old Mr. Wallace, asked me to cover the midnight to dawn watch because his nephew had the flu. It was simple work I'd done 100 times: check the gates, feed it too, keep the generator warm, and make sure the cameras were recording. I drove in at 11:37 p.m., frost already filming the edges of the windshield, the fields flat and black under a sky with no moon. The farm was the kind that goes quiet so completely you start to hear your own breathing. One house for the family, empty that night. A long slab-sided barn with a hayloft, a smaller tool shed, the milking parlor, and 2 fenced pens. Wind rattled the tin roof. The cows settled in low, heavy shapes, their breath smoking in the cold. I signed the logbook, checked the battery on my radio, and did the first walk. Nothing was wrong until I reached Pen B. The gate was latched, but hanging crooked, and every cow inside was standing facing the same corner, noses tilted at the wall like they were smelling something only they could smell. I swung my flashlight over the boards and saw nothing but wet knots of hay. When I moved, they flinched in perfect unison, as if I'd clapped right behind them. I chalked it up to a stray coyote out in the field, or the way the wind pushed scents down from the loft. Back in the office trailer I checked the cameras. 8 squares blinked up at me: yard, parlor, both pens, north gate, loft ladder, corridor, generator pad. The timestamps rolled as they should. In the feed from the north gate, for a second I thought I saw a shoulder cross the far edge of the frame. When I reversed, it was gone. I told myself it was frost glare, a glitch. The monitor always hiccuped in the cold. At 12:41 a.m. the barn's side door creaked. The kind of creak you feel as much as hear. I went to it, pulled it shut, and reset the latch. The metal was colder than it should have been. While I stood there, a low thud came from overhead. I looked up and saw dust sifting from the seam where the loft floor met the wall. The loft. Of course. The last time anyone stored hay up there was 2 summers ago. Squirrels. Raccoons. Nothing worth thinking twice about. I climbed the narrow stairs with the flashlight in my teeth, palms on both rails because one step always pitched left. At the top, my beam slid over old bales fallen flat, a stack of cracked milk crates, a broken push broom, and the bones of a scarecrow the family's kid had made for Halloween years back. The air smelled of mouse pellets and old rain. When I swept the light right, it caught on a small scuffed circle on the floorboards, like someone had stood there and turned slowly on their heel. No prints in the dust leading to it, none away. I crouched and pressed a finger to the circle. The wood felt warm where my finger touched it, though the air bit my ears. From below, a chain clinked against a stall post. One clink. Another. Then silence. I breathed, waited, heard nothing else, and headed down. On the stairs, my radio popped like it had caught a word, just one, swallowed by static. At 1:03 a.m. the office phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, and picked up. I said my name, the farm's name, asked who was calling. The line was open, but all I got was thin air and a faint scrape that could have been wind on wire. I hung up. The phone rang again, same number. I didn't answer. I made the second walk. The cows in pen were chewing slow and watching me with that moon-pale look their eyes get under flash. In pen B, they had turned from the corner and were clustered along the fence closest to the loft ladder, as if waiting for me to go up again. As I passed the parlor, the fluorescent over the wash sink shivered and went out. The corridor stayed lit. When the hum of the ballast died, the quiet rolled in thicker. I checked the generator. It idled steady. The temperature needle sat just shy of midpoint. The oil gauge was fine. When I closed the hatch, I noticed a single boot print on the concrete pad next to mine, pointed toward the barn. Not my size. A little narrower. No grit pattern, just a smooth sole like an old rubber boot. I flashed the beam around the pad, into the weeds, across the gravel toward the north gate. Nothing. My own breath smoked. It drifted left as if the wind pulled only one way, even though the weeds stood still. Back at the monitors, 1:27 a.m., the north gate camera stuttered again. A shape between frames, not even a blur, more like a piece of the picture had sagged and then snapped back. I froze the feed and leaned in until the pixels broke apart under my eyes. The time code flicked to 1:28 a.m., then 1:28 a.m. again, as if the counter coughed and repeated itself. I reset the system, and all 8 squares blinked to black and came back. The barn door creaked a second time. This time it opened an inch. I heard it kiss the jamb. I walked to it slow, hand on the latch, and pulled it flush. The metal, again, colder than the air. My flashlight cut across the yard, and in that thin, colorless light the gravel looked like a river held still. I stood and listened until my own pulse grew loud and foolish in my ears. Routine saves nerves. I went back to routine. I filled the feed cart, ran the line, checked the water, stacked a new bag of alfalfa by the parlor because the old one had slumped. As I lifted, my radio hissed and a voice came through, my voice, flattened and bent by distance, saying my name the way my mother did when I was a kid and had stayed out too late. I dropped the bag. The radio went dead. I pressed the call button and got nothing but the sound of my thumb on plastic. I walked to the foot of the loft ladder and looked up into the square of dark. The quiet had a held breath in it. I told myself something simple and small. A raccoon. A barn cat. A stuck hinge, a slipping ballast, a glitch in a camera that should have been replaced 5 years ago. I said those things out loud because sometimes words change a shape back into what it is. A soft step crossed directly above me. One step. Another. The dust at the edge of the hatch loosened and drifted down like gray snow. My flashlight picked out a single straw stem spiraling as it fell. I stood there with my hand on the first rung and counted to 5. At 5, I pulled my hand back. The night air outside had thickened, carrying the smell of damp earth and silage. Inside the barn, the fluorescent lights hummed weakly, their glow sinking into the corners like tired eyes. It was after 2 a.m. The wind had stopped entirely, but the walls creaked as if something leaned against them from outside. I remember thinking how the quiet here wasn't normal, it pressed on you, heavy, like the air itself was listening. I was sitting in the small office when the cows began to move again. Their hooves struck the floor in uneven rhythm, like a slow drumbeat. I looked up at the monitors. In Pen B, all the animals were bunched tight against the far wall, facing the same direction, toward the ladder that led to the hayloft. The same corner as before. I told myself it was nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the corridor. The moment I opened the barn door, the sound hit me, a muffled rustling, followed by something like a whisper. It wasn't wind. It was too steady, too measured, like someone speaking through a wall of straw. The ladder to the loft stood open, its wooden rungs slick from years of use. I aimed the light upward. Dust hung in the beam like fog, slowly drifting down. For a long moment, I listened. The whispering stopped. Then, 2 voices, low and overlapping, one male, one younger, almost a child. I froze, trying to catch a word, but the sounds blended into each other, a murmur too close to be real. I climbed. My boots met the boards with hollow thuds. The air grew warmer near the ceiling, filled with the stale smell of hay and mold. My light caught the same broken scarecrow I'd seen earlier, but now it stood upright against the far wall. Its burlap head tilted slightly toward me, and one arm, the one that had been hanging loose, was raised just enough to look like it was pointing. The sound came again, right behind me this time. I spun the light around, but the space was empty. My pulse thudded in my neck. I backed toward the ladder and stopped. From below came a metallic rattle, quick and sharp. The chain gate. When I reached the ground floor, the cows were in a panic, pushing against the fences, their eyes rolling white. One of them, a brown Holstein, was lying on its side, legs kicking weakly. I ran to it, knelt down, and the smell of blood hit me. There was nothing visible, no wound, no struggle, but its eyes were open wide and fixed on the ceiling. Within seconds it went still. The radio on my belt crackled. A burst of static, then my name, Mike. The voice was faint, flat, but it was mine. I froze. Then another sound, my phone ringing from the office. When I got there, the small screen glowed with a number I didn't know. The name field said simply Barn. My stomach turned cold. I picked it up, said hello, and heard only breathing, slow, wet, deliberate. I hung up. It rang again immediately. I didn't answer. Instead, I checked the monitors. The north gate camera flickered and rolled. A tall shape stood outside the fence, facing the barn. It didn't move. The figure was motionless for a full minute, the image grainy and ghosted by interference. I zoomed in, there was a hood, a long coat, hands hanging low. Then, without any jump or fade, the frame cleared, and the gate was empty. The power lights blinked twice. The monitors cut out for half a second, then returned. In that flash, I saw my own reflection in the dark screen, but not alone. Behind me, for an instant, another face, pale and narrow, with eyes too dark to catch the light. When the feed came back, I spun around. Nothing. The cows had gone quiet again. Total silence. Even the hum of the generator seemed distant. I walked to the door and stepped outside. The sky had clouded over, no stars, no sound. My flashlight barely reached the fence. Something scraped above me on the tin roof, slow, like claws on metal. I raised the beam and saw a dark smear moving along the ridgeline. I took a step back. It stopped. The beam shook in my hand. Then a long, drawn-out creak came from the hayloft door high above, the one that opened to the outside. It swayed open a few inches and stayed there. I went back inside. I should have left, but I told myself I couldn't. Mr. Wallace's herd was here, his equipment, his livelihood. I shut the main door, slid the bolt, and tried to breathe normally. I told myself that in a few hours the sun would rise, and everything would make sense again. When I sat down, the radio came alive once more, my voice whispering through static, "Don't go upstairs." Then silence. I turned it off, but deep above me, in the loft, something heavy shifted, dragging through the hay. By 3 a.m., the night had gone completely still. Even the hum of the generator outside sounded distant, muffled, as if the air itself was thicker. I hadn't sat down since that last whisper over the radio. Every sense felt sharpened to a painful edge, every shadow stretched longer than it should. I stood by the barn window, watching the yard. My flashlight beam caught the fence line, the gravel road beyond, and the empty field that reached toward the tree line. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a dark shape between the fence posts, but when I blinked, it was gone. The clock on the office wall read 2:17 a.m. I glanced at my wristwatch, 2:17 a.m. The monitor's timestamp, 2:17 a.m. I stared at it for a full minute, but the second hand didn't move. Every clock in the barn was frozen. I went outside to check the generator again. The cold hit harder now, biting through my jacket. Frost coated the ground like glass dust. My breath came in clouds. The yard felt wider than before, emptier. When I reached the pad, the generator was still running, steady as ever. But the air around it felt wrong, no vibration, no warmth, as if it was running silently in another world. Then I saw them, footprints. 2 sets, side by side in the frost, leading from the back fence toward the barn. My boots were larger, heavier. These were smaller, narrower, rubber soles, smooth tread. They stopped near the generator and turned toward me. I spun, light sweeping over the field. A figure stood out there among the hay bales. Still as stone. A long dark coat, hood drawn low, hands hanging by his sides. I shouted, my voice cracked in the cold, but the figure didn't move. I took a step forward, and the beam flickered. When the light steadied again, the field was empty. My heart hammered. I ran back inside, slammed the door, and dropped the bolt. The radio hissed once, then went silent. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I went straight to the monitor. The North Gate feed was stuttering again, lines of static crawling across the image. I rewound 30 seconds. There he was, the same dark figure, standing at the fence, motionless, head tilted toward the barn. I zoomed in. The camera distorted his face, but it wasn't the blur that unsettled me, it was that the shape didn't cast a shadow. The other objects around him did. He didn't. I printed the frame, but the printer spat out a blank page. I tried again. Same thing, empty white. The barn lights flickered. I heard a sound above me, heavy and slow, like boots crossing the hayloft floor. Then, a pause. And a second pair of steps joined the first. I grabbed the flashlight and the crowbar from the wall. The cows started lowing again, deep and panicked, slamming against the fences. The air filled with dust and noise. I shouted to drown the fear, climbed the ladder, and reached the top. The beam swept across the loft. Nothing. Only scattered hay, the upright scarecrow, and a draft rolling through the open loft door. I walked closer, forcing myself forward one slow step at a time. The door was swinging slightly on its hinge, though the wind outside had died. The floorboards under my boots groaned like they were breathing. Something caught the edge of my light, a notebook half buried in the hay. Its cover was warped, water-stained, but the writing inside was still clear. Dates, names, short entries. The first line read, April 14th, 1998, he came again. Watches from the fence. Don't speak if he looks at you. The next page. May 2nd, 1998, we told Wallace to close the farm. He won't. Says there's no one there. The handwriting turned frantic near the end. If you see him in the mirror, it's already too late. I dropped the notebook. Something moved behind me, fast, scraping wood. I turned. The scarecrow was lying flat on the floor now, face down. Straw scattered everywhere. My chest tightened. I backed toward the ladder, eyes locked on that dark, limp shape. Then, the generator outside stopped. The hum died instantly, plunging everything into total silence. No lights. No sound. Only my breath echoing through the rafters. From below came the faint squeal of the barn door opening. I froze. My flashlight beam trembled across the hay. A voice called from the dark beneath me, my own voice, calm and close. Mike. Come down. Every muscle in me went rigid. The light shook harder. Mike, it said again. You don't have to be afraid. It sounded exactly like me, but slower, heavier, almost smiling. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the boards, the beam spinning wild circles. I scrambled down the ladder, every rung slipping under my palms. When my boots hit the ground, the door was wide open, the night staring in. No one stood there. Only the field, still and gray with frost. Then the door began to close on its own, hinges squealing. When the generator died, the silence that followed felt alive. It was the kind of silence that presses against your skin, waiting for a sound to fill it. The barn was swallowed by darkness, broken only by the weak yellow glow from my flashlight rolling on the floor. The cows had gone completely quiet, as if holding their breath with me. I crouched, grabbed the flashlight, and tried to steady my hands. The beam trembled across the stalls. Dust floated through the air like ash. I forced myself to breathe. It's just the breaker, I whispered. Saying something out loud made it feel less real, less like a dream I couldn't wake from. I made for the side door, pushing it open with my shoulder. The cold hit me like a wall. My boots crunched on frozen gravel. Out by the fence, fog hung low, hugging the ground. The sky had turned the dull gray of pre-dawn, but there was no light coming from anywhere. The generator sat still, silent, with a thin trail of steam rising from its vent. I lifted the hatch. The smell of hot oil burned my nose. Every wire looked intact, every gauge normal. Yet the air around it felt hollow, like the sound had been pulled out of the world. I turned back toward the barn, and stopped. In the open doorway stood a figure, framed by the dim light inside. The same shape I'd seen on the cameras. The same hood pulled low over its face. I froze where I was. My flashlight beam shook, cutting across its chest. No eyes. No movement. Just stillness. "Who's there?" I called out. The words came out cracked and small. The figure didn't answer. I took a step forward, heart hammering, the beam trembling in my grip. For a split second, the light passed over its face, empty shadow beneath the hood. And then, without moving, it was gone. One blink, and the doorway stood open and bare again. I ran to the barn, slammed the door, and locked it. My lungs burned as I tried to catch my breath. My hand reached for the radio clipped to my belt. I pressed the button. "Wallace, this is Mike. I need help. There's someone out here." Static answered me. Then, faintly, a voice came through, warped, distorted. "You shouldn't have stayed." The voice was mine. The radio clicked dead. I dropped it, the sound echoing off the concrete floor. For a long time, I didn't move. I stood by the stalls, breathing hard, staring at the shadowed ladder to the loft. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I couldn't. My truck was parked by the main gate, half a mile down the gravel road. I had to cross the open field to reach it. I forced myself toward the front door, unbolted it, and pushed it open. The fog had thickened, swallowing the fence and the road. My flashlight barely reached 10 feet ahead. I stepped outside, boots crunching on gravel, one hand on the wall to steady myself. Halfway to the gate, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, matching my pace. I stopped. They stopped. I turned the light back. The fog rippled, but there was nothing there. I took another step, and the footsteps began again, closer now. I broke into a run. My breath came out in gasps, white and sharp. The truck appeared through the mist, a dark lump with frost crusting its hood. I yanked the door open, jumped in, and twisted the key. Nothing. The dash lights blinked once, then went black. I hit the key again. The battery was dead. Something brushed the side of the truck, a faint drag of fingers across metal. I froze, staring at the fogged window. A handprint appeared on the glass, pale and thin, pressing from the outside. I threw the door open and stumbled out. My flashlight flickered, its beam slicing through the fog in short bursts. The handprint was gone. In the distance, through the wall of mist, I saw the barn door open again. Slowly. Carefully. A shadow stepped out and began to walk toward me. I backed away until my heel caught the ditch. My heart slammed in my chest. The figure stopped halfway across the field. Even through the fog I could see it clearly now, the coat, the hood, the way its head tilted slightly as if studying me. "Stay away!" I shouted. My voice cracked and vanished into the mist. It didn't stop. I turned and ran. The gravel shifted under my boots. Every few steps I looked back, but the fog swallowed everything behind me. I could still hear the crunch of its footsteps, measured, patient, never rushing. When I reached the tree line at the edge of the property, I stopped, bent over, gasping. The night had grown quieter than ever, no wind, no animals, no sound at all. Just my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I took one last look toward the farm. Through the fog, I saw the faint flicker of light, coming from the loft window. Someone was up there. Watching. I turned back toward the road, ready to keep running, when my radio crackled to life one last time. "Mike," my voice said softly. "You forgot something." I don't remember running through the forest. I only remember the sound of my own breathing and the cold tearing at my throat. The trees blurred into shadows, branches scraping my jacket as I stumbled forward. When I finally stopped, the fog had followed me, thick, low, silent. I turned back toward the farm, but there was no light left. No barn. No road. Only gray. I stayed there until dawn. When the sun rose, it was weak and pale, just enough to show the dirt on my hands and the frost on my sleeves. The fields were quiet again, perfectly still. I thought maybe I had dreamed it all. Maybe exhaustion and fear had twisted the night into something else. But when I walked back toward the farm, my boots left no prints in the frost. The ground was smooth behind me, like it refused to remember I'd been there. The gate stood open, hanging crooked on one hinge. My truck was still parked by the fence, door wide, keys in the ignition. A crow perched on the hood, pecking at the antenna. The air smelled burnt, metallic. I walked slowly toward the barn, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the silence was unbearable. The generator was cold, the lights dead. Straw and dust coated the floor. I called out once, just to hear my own voice. It didn't echo. When I reached the stalls, I stopped. Every cow was gone. The gates were open, chains hanging loose. The air was heavy with the smell of something rotten, sweet and sour, clinging to my throat. My flashlight caught dark streaks along the concrete, like water lines but thicker. I followed them toward the far wall. Near the base of the loft ladder, I found a handprint in the dust. Mine. Next to it, another, smaller, smoother, pressed deep enough to bend the straw beneath it. Above, something had been dragged down the wall, leaving faint marks that stopped halfway, as if whatever it was had vanished mid-fall. The office door was half open. I pushed it gently, the hinges groaning. The monitors still blinked, weak light pulsing across the screens. I didn't remember turning them on. Each camera feed showed the same still frame, the barn empty, lights out, nothing moving. Except one. In the top left screen, the loft view was live. Someone was standing there, in the same spot where I'd dropped the flashlight. A tall shape in a hood, perfectly still. I watched for a full minute, waiting for the static to clear. It didn't. I walked backward toward the door, not daring to look away. Then the figure moved. Not much, just enough for the shadow of its arm to rise, slow, like it was pointing directly at me. The flashlight slipped from my hand. I turned and ran. Out through the door, across the yard, past the gate, into the road. I didn't stop until I reached the next property, half a mile away. A man there, some farmer I didn't know, was feeding his dogs. I must have looked wild, shaking, covered in dirt. He didn't ask questions. He called the police. By the time they arrived, the fog had burned off. The officers searched every inch of the farm. No footprints but mine. No cows, no signs of anyone else. The barn was empty except for an overturned ladder and a cracked radio. They took my statement, but I could see in their eyes they didn't believe me. Later that afternoon, Mr. Wallace arrived. He was quiet the whole time the officers talked. When they left, he asked me what happened. I told him everything, the voices, the footprints, the figure in the hood. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded and said, "You weren't the first one to see him." I asked what he meant, but he wouldn't say. He only told me to go home and rest. Said he'd call when things were sorted out. He never did. 2 days later, I drove past the farm again. The gate was chained shut, a new padlock glinting in the light. A for sale sign stood by the road. The barn windows were dark, but for a split second as I passed, I thought I saw movement inside, something shifting behind the glass, slow and deliberate. That night, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. My phone screen was glowing. Unknown number. I answered before I thought about it. At first, there was just silence. Then a voice, my voice, quiet, calm, and close. "You shouldn't have stayed," it said. The line went dead. Since that night, I don't work nights anymore. I moved 2 towns over, took a job at a warehouse, started seeing a doctor. I tell myself it's over. That what happened on that farm was just exhaustion and fear. But sometimes, just before dawn, I still hear the chain on the gate rattle, even though I'm miles away. And every clock in my house still stops at 2:17.